The beach. For most of us, it's a symbol of paradise, a place of escape, of sun-drenched days and carefree nights. It's where we build sandcastles, feel the warm water on our toes, and let the rhythm of the tides wash our worries away. The beach house is the ultimate dream, a private sanctuary where the only sound is the ocean's gentle lullaby. But what happens when that dream becomes a trap? When the sound of the waves isn't washing away your worries, but hiding another sound, something closer? What happens when you realize you aren't alone in your sanctuary, and the vast, empty ocean means no one can hear you scream? Tonight, we're not talking about paradise. We're peeling back the sunny exterior to reveal the chilling beach house horror stories that lie beneath. These are 3 allegedly true accounts from people who rented their dream home on the coast and found a nightmare waiting for them. Welcome! Our first story takes us to the rugged, windswept coast of Oregon. It was submitted by a man named Mark, who thought he and his wife, Sarah, had found the perfect spot for a late anniversary getaway. The house was old, built from dark timber that had weathered a century of storms. It was charming, rustic, and most importantly, isolated. It was just them, the cliffs, and the sea. The first day was perfect, but perfection, as they would soon discover, is a fragile thing. They called this story The Sound of the Tides. Mark and Sarah arrived on a Tuesday afternoon. The air was thick with salt and the smell of damp pine from the nearby woods. The real estate photos, Mark said, didn't do the place justice. It had character. The floorboards creaked in a comforting way, and a huge stone fireplace dominated the living room. They unpacked, lit a fire, and watched the gray Pacific churn from their window. They felt completely at peace. The first strange occurrence happened that night. Sarah woke up around 2 a.m. She wasn't sure why, but she had this nagging feeling of unease. She lay in bed, listening. Over the constant, rhythmic crash of the waves, she heard something else. A faint, dragging sound. She nudged Mark awake. He listened, groggy and annoyed. At first, he heard nothing but the ocean. "It's just the house settling," he mumbled and rolled over. Sarah tried to dismiss it, telling herself he was right. It was an old house, after all, but she couldn't shake the feeling that the sound wasn't the house. It sounded wet, saturated, like a heavy fishing net, full of water being pulled slowly across the floor in the room below them. She eventually fell into a restless sleep, the sound fading in and out with the roar of the tide. The next day was beautiful. The sun broke through the clouds, and they spent the afternoon walking the beach, collecting agates. The strange sounds of the night felt like a distant dream. They laughed and forgot all about it. That evening, they made dinner, drank a bottle of wine, and fell asleep to the sound of the fire crackling. This time, it was Mark who woke up. The fire was out. The house was pitch black, and the sound was back. It was clearer now. It was definitely coming from the living room, directly below their bedroom. Thump, scrape, a long, wet drag, then a pause. Mark sat bolt upright in bed. Sarah was awake too, her eyes wide in the darkness. "You hear that?" she whispered. Mark nodded, his heart beginning to pound. It wasn't the house settling. It wasn't the wind. It was a deliberate, rhythmic sound, and it was unquestionably inside the house. Mark, trying to be the rational one, grabbed the heavy metal flashlight from the nightstand. He told Sarah to stay put. His plan was to creep downstairs, flick on the lights, and reveal whatever stray animal or bizarre draft was causing the noise. He opened the bedroom door, wincing as it creaked. The sound downstairs stopped. The house was utterly silent, save for the ever-present waves. He crept to the top of the stairs, peering down into the blackness. He could feel a strange, cold draft coming up from below. He took a deep breath and started down the stairs, one step at a time. The old wood groaned under his weight. He reached the bottom, his hand fumbling along the wall for the light switch. His fingers found it. He flipped it. Nothing. The living room was empty. The doors were locked, the windows sealed. There was no sign of entry, no wet spots on the floor, nothing out of place. He felt a bit foolish, but also deeply unnerved. He checked the entire ground floor. Nothing. He went back upstairs, told Sarah it was nothing, and they tried to get back to sleep. But the sound returned an hour later. Thump scrape. This time, it was accompanied by something else. The faint, unmistakable smell of salt water and rotting seaweed wafting up from the floorboards. It was so strong, so out of place that Sarah started to gag. They spent the rest of the night huddled together, wide awake, listening to the dreadful, unexplained sounds from below. As the sun began to rise, the sounds faded, and with them, the smell. Exhausted and terrified, they packed their bags in a frantic rush. They didn't even make coffee. They just threw their luggage in the car and left 2 days early. A week later, back in the safety of their own home, Mark, still bothered by the experience, decided to do a little research. He couldn't find any ghost stories about the property online, but he did find a forum for local history buffs in that area of Oregon. He posted a vague question about old beach houses and strange noises. He got one reply. It was from an old man who had lived in the area his whole life. His message was short and chilling. He said that the house Mark described was built over the original foundation of an old fisherman's shack that had been washed away in a storm in the 1920s. The fisherman, a recluse nobody really knew, was lost to the sea. They found his body washed up on the beach a week later, tangled in his own heavy net. His body was so waterlogged and battered by the rocks that they said the only way his wife could move him off the beach and back to the shack was to drag him. Mark said he and Sarah have never been back to the Oregon coast. And now, whenever he hears the sound of waves, he can't help but listen for what might be hiding underneath. There's a unique vulnerability that comes with staying in a place that isn't yours. You don't know its quirks, its sounds, its history. An old house groans, the wind howls. It's easy to let your imagination run wild. But sometimes, it's not your imagination. Sometimes, the history of a place is still very much alive. It's these elements that make for the most compelling, creepy, true stories. The ones that linger with you long after you've heard them. Our second story moves from the cold, rocky shores of the Pacific to the warm, humid coastline of the Carolinas. It comes from a woman named Jenna, who took her 2 young children, a 9-year-old boy named Liam and a 7-year-old girl, Maya, for a summer beach trip. The house was the opposite of our last one. It was bright, modern, and painted a cheerful yellow. It promised fun and sunlight. But some houses, no matter how bright, hold on to their darkness. This story is called The Collector's Shells. Anna and her kids were thrilled. The house was perfect. It had a big deck, an open-concept kitchen, and best of all, a private path right down to the beach. For the first few days, it was an idyllic family vacation. They swam, built elaborate sandcastles, and ate ice cream on the porch. The kids were having the time of their lives. But there was one odd thing about the house. In the upstairs hallway, there was a small, narrow door. It was painted the same cheerful white as the rest of the walls, but it had an old, rusty-looking deadbolt on it, for which there was no key on the house key. Jenna assumed it was an owner's closet and told the kids to leave it alone. Of course, a locked door is an irresistible mystery to a child. Liam and Maya became obsessed with it. They'd press their ears against it, trying to hear what was inside. They'd jiggle the handle. They were convinced it was a room full of treasure or old toys. On their 4th day, while exploring a dusty closet under the stairs looking for board games, Liam's hand brushed against something taped to the underside of a shelf. It was a single, old-fashioned iron key. He knew instantly what it was for. That night, after Jenna was asleep, Liam and Maya crept out of their room, the key held tight in Liam's hand. They tiptoed to the mysterious door. With a click that sounded deafeningly loud in the quiet house, the old lock turned. They pushed the door open. The room was small, maybe the size of a walk-in closet, and it had no windows. And it was filled with shelves, floor to ceiling on all 3 walls. And on those shelves were seashells, thousands of them, every size, shape, and color. They were arranged with a strange, obsessive precision. Swirls of tiny white shells, lines of large brown conches, patterns made from scallops and whelks. It was bizarre, but also kind of beautiful. But the air in the room was heavy, stale, and cold. A deep, unnatural cold that made the hairs on their arms stand up. Maya, the younger one, felt it first. A feeling of being watched. a feeling of deep disapproval. "Liam," she whispered, "I don't like it in here." Liam, however, was mesmerized. He walked to the center of the room. There, on a small, velvet-covered table, was a separate collection, set apart from the others. It wasn't shells. It was a small, ornate wooden box. His curiosity getting the better of him, he lifted the lid. Inside, nestled on a bed of black satin, were not jewels or treasure. They were teeth. A small pile of yellowed, human-looking teeth. Some small, like a child's. Some large, like a man's. A wave of pure terror washed over the children. Liam slammed the box shut, and they scrambled out of the room, fumbling to lock the door behind them. They ran back to their beds, pulling the covers over their heads, trembling. They didn't speak a word of it to their mom the next day. They were too scared, but something had changed. The cheerful house no longer felt welcoming. They started hearing things. A soft, shuffling sound from the hallway at night. The faint clicking noise like small stones or shells being tapped together. Maya swore she saw an old woman's face, wrinkled and angry, looking in at her from the hallway for just a second before disappearing. The final straw came 2 nights later. Jenna woke up needing a glass of water. As she walked down the hallway, she noticed the door to the kids' room was ajar. Peeking in, she saw Maya's bed was empty. Panicked, she looked over at Liam's bed and saw both her children huddled together, fast asleep. She was about to go back to her room, relieved, when she glanced back at Maya's empty bed. On the pillow, where her daughter's head should have been, was a single, perfect spiral shell. She had no idea how it got there. They hadn't brought any shells inside the house. Jenna didn't try to understand it. She packed up the car first thing in the morning, telling the kids they had to leave because of a family emergency. As they were pulling out of the driveway, she took one last look at the house. In the upstairs window, the one she knew was the master bedroom, she thought she saw the silhouette of a stooped figure, watching them go. Later, she found a small rental review for the property, buried pages deep online. It just said, "Lovely house, but avoid if you have children." The collector doesn't like to share. That story touches on a different kind of fear. It's not just about a violent event or a noisy ghost. It's about a lingering presence, an obsession so strong that it contaminates a place long after the person is gone. What if a place, especially a haunted beach house, isn't just home to a ghost, but to an obsession, a will that refuses to let go of its collection? For our final story, we go to a place known for sunshine and sand, Florida, but this account has none of that warmth. It's about the primal fear of being exposed, of being watched. A young woman named Chloe, a graphic designer, rented a very modern, minimalist beach house for a solo work cat-eye. It was her first time traveling alone, a trip meant to build her confidence. It did the opposite. She calls this the Watcher on the Dune. Chloe was in heaven. The house was an architectural marvel. The entire back wall, facing the ocean, was just a sheet of glass. From her living room, her kitchen, her bedroom, it was an uninterrupted panorama of the sea and the sky. During the day, it was breathtaking. She felt like she was living inside a postcard. The feeling began to change as night fell. The beautiful glass walls that let all the light in during the day now reflected the dark, empty beach back at her. And worse, they reflected the brightly lit interior of the house. She felt like she was on a stage, every movement visible to the vast, black emptiness outside. She drew the curtains that first night, feeling a little silly, but undeniably safer. The second night, she got absorbed in her work. She was sitting at the dining table, her laptop open, music playing softly in her headphones. It was late, close to midnight. She happened to glance up, past her own reflection in the glass, out towards the dunes that separated the house from the main beach. And that's when she saw him, or it, a silhouette, perfectly still, just a tall, slender shape of pure blackness against the slightly less black night sky. It was standing on the highest dune, maybe 100 yards away, staring at the house. At her. Her blood ran cold. She ripped her headphones off. The only sound was the gentle lapping of the waves. She stared, unblinking, at the figure. It didn't move, not an inch. Was it a person? A strange piece of driftwood? A shadow playing tricks? She watched it for what felt like an eternity, her heart hammering against her ribs. Finally, she forced herself to act. She quickly stood up and in one swift motion, yanked the heavy curtains shut, blocking out the night. She double-checked the locks on the glass doors, her hands trembling. She told herself it was just a fisherman, someone out for a late-night walk. But it hadn't been walking. It had been watching. She barely slept. The next day, in the bright, unforgiving sunlight, she looked out at the dune. There was nothing there, just sand and sea oats. She felt foolish, convinced she had imagined it. She spent the day trying to shake the feeling, forcing herself to enjoy the sun, to swim in the ocean. She was determined not to let a shadow ruin her trip. That night, she decided to be brave. She left the curtains open. She was not going to be scared out of her rental by her own overactive imagination. She made dinner, put on a movie, and tried to ignore the wall of black glass beside her. But she couldn't. Every few minutes, her eyes would flick towards the dunes. They remained empty. Around 10 p.m., she let out a sigh of relief. See? Nothing. It was all her head. She got up to get a drink from the kitchen. As she turned back towards the living room, she glanced out the window again. It was back. Same spot. Same unnerving stillness. Just standing there, watching. This time, there was no doubt. It was a figure, and it was facing her. A cold dread, sharp and acidic, filled her stomach. This was not a random person. This was deliberate. She felt targeted. She grabbed her phone, her fingers shaking so badly she could barely unlock it. Who would she even call? The police? To tell them a man was standing on a public beach? It sounded insane. Instead, she turned off every light in the house, plunging herself into darkness. Her logic was simple. If she couldn't see it, it couldn't see her. She crept to her bedroom, locked the door, and hid under the covers like a child. She lay there for hours, listening. The minutes stretched into an eternity. Finally, unable to stand the suspense, she had to know if it was still there. She slowly, quietly, crept out of her bedroom and back into the dark living room. The moon had risen, casting a faint, silvery light over the scene. She crept towards a giant glass wall, staying low, and peered out towards the dune. The spot where the figure had been standing was empty. A wave of relief, so powerful, almost made her dizzy, washed over her. It was gone. It had left. It was over. She stood up straight, letting out a shaky breath. And in that moment of relief, she caught her own reflection in the glass. Pale, terrified, but it wasn't just her reflection. Standing right behind her, reflected in the glass, so close it was almost touching her, was the tall, dark silhouette. She didn't scream. She said the sound wouldn't come out. She just spun around, and there was nothing there. The room was empty, but the image in the glass had been undeniable. It wasn't on the dune anymore. It was inside with her. Chloe didn't remember getting to her car. The next thing she knew, she was driving, doing 90 miles an hour down the highway, leaving her laptop, her clothes, everything behind. She never went back. She just called the rental company from a motel 2 hours away and told them to mail her things. She never told them why she left. What could she possibly say? 3 houses, 3 different coasts, 3 experiences that turned a dream vacation into a story that will be told in hushed tones for a lifetime. The beach is a place of edges. The edge of the land, the edge of the sea. Maybe sometimes it's the edge of our world in another. A place where the veil is thin and things can wash up on the shore that were never meant to be seen. So the next time you find yourself in a quiet house by the sea and you hear a strange sound over the crashing of the waves, ask yourself, is it just the house settling, or has something else come in with the tide? Thank you for joining me tonight. If these stories sent a chill down your spine, consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more explorations into the unexplained. And I'd love to read your thoughts or even your own experiences in the comments below. Until next time, stay safe and be careful what doors you open.